Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience and that little delay. I am so excited to be here with John Grisham. I have been at Murder by the Book 17 years, and he is one of the authors that I've never met. So I'm so excited to be able to meet him at least virtually today. Thank you. How are you doing today? Are you still stuck in the garage?
Happy to be in Houston. Yes, sort of. We're in quarantine. We haven't left the farm very much. So we're taking it very serious. And I started sneaking away to the garage a few weeks ago just to have something to do. And I like to recommend books. And so we started making videos.
They've been great videos. I love the rooster bar sign behind them too. So for the fans who are watching, if you want to start typing in any questions you have, John here at Murder by the Book is going to be monitoring them, and will pass them to me later on in this chat, just so we can kind of try to cover some fan questions too. Today we're here to talk about Camino Wins, which I'm reading now and loving. I loved Camino Island. But when I interview, I typically ask first question, what's your elevator pitch for the new book?
It's a murder mystery about a writer who gets murdered in the middle of a hurricane.
Sounds great. I was completely charmed by Camino Island and the caper plot, book selling, all of it. And as I said, I'm reading Camino Wins now. And to me, that plot, an island full of writers, a dead thriller writer, and a hurricane bearing down. I'm here in Houston. I own a mystery bookstore in Houston. So all of that is stuff I'm familiar with. And I'm just really enjoying it. It's out today, and we are going to have signed copies. So thank you for that. The Washington Post said about Camino Wins that the whole thing reads as if the Hardy Boys were in their late 40s and had developed a taste for shrimp tacos and exquisite wines. As someone who's known for writing legal thrillers, what made you think to write one new beach reads?
It goes back to Camino Island, which I published 3 years ago. And I wanted to, I'm fascinated by rare books, the world of rare books. I collect them. I'm sort of a serious collector and have been for 30 years. I love to read about the theft of valuables. So there's some great stories out there. There's a lot of thievery in rare books and manuscripts and maps and cards and things like that. And I just became fascinated with it. And so I was talking to my wife one day and I said, how could we fashion a mystery or a caper around the theft of some stolen books and manuscripts? And that's how it started. Once I finished Camino Island, I really enjoyed it. It was a whole lot of fun to write a book with no lawyers in it, okay? And no legal issues and no really serious things going on, as I tend to write. And so I had the island set up perfectly. I had the bookseller, the bookstore, the literary mafia on Camino Island, the small town of Santa Rosa, all fiction. And I knew I would go back there for more books. And so this is my second time back. And I'll probably, I can, there's going to be three, there'll be at least three. But I wanted to, over the years, I've killed off a lot of lawyers and judges. And so I thought it was time to kill off a writer. So I fashioned this murder mystery. A young writer is murdered in the middle of a hurricane, a terrible hurricane that hits Camino Island. And it's a perfect time to kill somebody if you want to do that, because there are a lot of distractions. The police are engaged elsewhere, and the murder was such that you weren't sure it was a murder. There were no clues left behind, and so are very few. And it took a while to realize it was actually a murder, and the police were too busy. And so our heroes, the Hardy Boys in their 40s, have to solve the murder.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's great. It's evident in these books that you have a genuine love of independent bookstores, which I am a sucker for. Could you please talk about the inspiration behind Bay Books on Camino Island?
It's fashioned after my favorite bookstore in the world is still Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi. I lived there for 4 years, and even before I moved there in 1990, I had spent off and on 10 years visiting the store, taking road trips with a buddy of mine to go down, hang out at the bookstore and meet writers. A lot of writers go to Square Books. And so I just love that store and never thought about writing about it. But when I set up Bay Books in Santa Rosa on Camino Island, I fashioned it after Square Books almost completely. 2 stories. Upstairs is a cafe, a coffee bar, an outside porch where I've spent many hours. So I love that bookstore, and I wanted to kind of replicate it in my novel. And that's how Bay Books became just like Square Books.
Yeah, I thought that might be the case, but yeah, it's great. It's a store I want to go visit, both Square Books and the fictional Bay Books. You already kind of touched on this, but there is a lot about book collecting in these books. You said you are a collector. Who do you collect?
About 30 years ago, we had just moved to Oxford, and there was a gentleman who we met through a friend, and he owned a copy of a small self-published book by William Faulkner called The Marble Faun. And it was, he said there were only 2 or 3 copies he knew of in Oxford, only a handful in the world. And I was fascinated by it. He let me see it. It was in not great condition because it was self-published and not very well done. Unbeknownst to me, my wife sneaked around behind my back and she bought that book he wanted to sell it as a birthday gift, and she gave it to me. And that really began this fascination with book collecting. And so over the past 30 years, I have still pursued collecting the first editions of 20th century American writers, mainly Faulkner, Hemingway, Steinbeck, and Fitzgerald. And usually for me, a birthday gift for my wife or a Christmas gift is a book. And so, we put together a nice collection. But even yesterday, I heard from a dealer who had some fascinating stuff he wanted to sell. So I know several dealers, and it's just a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. It also sounds like there's a great reason you've been married so long.
There's a wonderful reason for that. In fact, the Camino Island, Renee and I were driving to Florida for our summer vacation. So we had a 12-hour drive with the dog, and we do it every year. We enjoyed doing it. And we were listening to NPR, and there was a great story about some stolen rare books and manuscripts. And we clicked it off and we started talking about it. And we do this all the time. What if you did this? What if you changed that fact? What if would this be a good story? And so how could you fashion a mystery a mystery about stolen books or rare books or manuscripts? That she was there. She was part of the original idea when I got started.
That's fantastic. That's great. It's great you can kind of spitball ideas off of her. And she's been there since the beginning, right? Reading your books.
She read the first chapter of A Time to Kill in 1985. We've been married for 3 or 4 years, 5 years. She's an English major, so she's a voracious reader. When we got married, her goal was to be a high school English teacher. She was really influenced by some high school English teachers, and she loves literature, loves to read, still reads a lot of stuff, and we both do. And so over the years, we've collected a lot of books. But she had no idea I wanted to be a writer. And when I gave her the first chapter of A Time to Kill in longhand, written on legal pads, I said, I'd like for you to read this chapter 1. And she said, what is it? I said, well, it's a novel I'm thinking about pursuing. She said, okay. And she read the first chapter. And I said, well, what do you think? After I came back in the house, I had to leave the house. And she said, I like it. I'd like to read some more. And that's how I got started.
Well, thank you to you and to her for that encouragement. While we're talking about A Time to Kill, I'm going to jump to one of my later questions. You have a legal thriller coming out in October this year, and I think people are going to be pretty excited about it. You want to give us just a couple seconds about what that's going to be? Sure,
I talk about it for a long time. It's without revealing anything. Sure. It's sort of a sequel to A Time to Kill. It's called A Time for Mercy. It's set back in Ford County, 5 years after the setting of A Time to Kill, 5 years after the trial of Carl Lee Haley. It involves Jake Brigance as the star of the book, the young lawyer, with another sensational murder case in the same town, the same characters. There's a lot of Harry Rex Bonner and Lucian Wilbanks, his sidekicks. Carl Lee Haley makes an appearance or two. The same judges, some of the same lawyers, and it's a small town in Mississippi gripped by horrible murder, and that Jake kind of gets stuck with. He didn't want to take the case, but he had no choice really. and the town turns against him, and he has a real struggle with, why do you represent people who do horrible things? How can you, as a lawyer, represent someone who commits an awful murder? And that's A Time for Mercy.
I cannot wait. I know a lot of people cannot wait for that one. But back to the Camino Island books. So Bruce Cable, who is owner of Bay Books, has been described as a roguish playboy character and maybe one of your least likable, but I find him completely lovable. Was there a particular inspiration for him or Megan Mann, our heroine?
No, he's completely fictional. He's 42 or 43 years old. He's handsome. He dresses nice. He has a beautiful wife. He loves lunch. He drinks a bottle of wine for lunch every day. He naps it off in the afternoon. He entertains writers. He throws big dinner parties for writers. He loves writers on tour. He loves the ladies. They love him. His wife doesn't care. And he runs his bookstore. He reads all the time. And he makes a ton of money from his bookstore with almost no staff. So you got to love fiction, okay?
I was about to say Bruce Cable is goals for me.
Yeah. he makes a lot of money. This is a fun part. He makes a lot of money dabbling in rare books, and he, over the years, has been known to the authorities as someone who will sneak into the black market and buy a book with a questionable past. And that's how Bruce has made a lot of money, especially in Camino Island. He ended up with some stolen manuscripts, and so he's really a fun character to write about. Mercer Mann is a young novelist in Camino Island. She comes back in Camino Winds. She's not that much a part of the story, but she was so popular especially with the female readers in the first book. She doesn't have much of a role in the second book. But the third book is probably going to be a lot more about her. I'm trying to think of the story where we can really showcase Mercer Mann, because she's a popular character.
Yeah, she's completely likable. It's been a delight reading her. Okay, a little more serious here. I read a quote of yours somewhere that said, quote, "I take a fictionalized case and use it to inform, expose, and enlighten the public about an issue, but with an unexpected ending," end quote. I know you're involved with the Innocence Project and have covered many other issues in books recently. Do you have something that's currently on your mind that's feeling its way into a book?
Not in Camino Winds.
Right.
In A Time for Mercy, the issue is it's very timely. The story takes place in 1990, 5 years after Carly Haley in Time to Kill. Back in 1990, in a lot of states, juveniles were still put on trial for capital murder. And many of them were sentenced to either death or sentenced to life without parole, which for a juvenile is a death sentence. Since then, the Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot sentence a minor to life without parole because, again, it's a death sentence. And you cannot put a minor on trial for capital murder. But the law was different in 1990. And that's the setting for A Time for Mercy. The murders committed by a 16-year-old kid.
Okay. Do you think you'll ever take inspiration from this crazy world we're living in right now, or work any type of pandemic into a forthcoming book?
I cannot visualize that. I cannot imagine that. But I've learned, never say never, because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't write about science fiction or horror. That's not what I enjoy writing about. Again, I've learned that you never know where a story's going to take you. And also, fiction is not true, but it has to be plausible or it doesn't work. And this is so crazy. This is historic. We've never seen this before. And I'm not sure I could make it plausible. So likely no. Fair enough.
That's the answer I expected, but I thought I'd put it out there. Speaking of the current environment, how is your everyday working life? What did a normal working day look like for you? And how have you had to adjust either for shelter at home or mental exhaustion, any of that?
Well, it's certainly not mental exhaustion. I don't overwork too much. I tell people I went into isolation 30 years ago. So this is nothing new for me. The only difference is I still write in the morning from 7 to 10, 7 to 11, get up early and get it done. I love the early morning hours when things are very quiet, and I go to my office, which is a small building behind our house with it's just one small building. It's my writer's cabin. No phones, no fax, no internet, no music. It's just me and the computer, typewriter, same cup of coffee, same quilt, everything. It's kind of dark and quiet, and I still, after 40 some odd books, I still love being there at 7:30 in the morning, creating, writing, having fun. The only difference is I start a book every year on a legal thriller every year on January the 1st. That's my rule. I start on January the 1st, and my goal is to be finished by July the 1st. So I have 6 months to do that, and that's plenty of time for me. So I work almost every day. January, February are great months to write. There's not much going on except college basketball, and that's at night. The biggest change for us is no travel. Since I have not been able to travel. I was supposed to go to France 3 weeks ago for a book festival. Obviously, we didn't go. We canceled like 6 or 8 trips this spring. So I've just been at home like everybody else. And it's been very productive, extremely productive. I'm worried this book could be way too long, way too thick, because I'm just writing so much. So it's been wonderful for me. What I've struggled with, though, that surprisingly is reading. I went out and bought a bunch of books. I plan to finally catch up with my reading. All the books I've been wanting to read because I have so little time to do it. And I've read a lot, but I've also found it difficult and finding it difficult to concentrate for long periods of time without a distraction or without the latest bad news or worrying about a friend or something like that. So I'm really struggling there.
Yeah, I'm personally doing the same thing, which is tough as a bookstore owner to not be able to just whip through the books that are coming out that I'm supposed to be reading. When we got notified that we could do this today, I thought, okay, I'll get through Camino wins like that. But I too am struggling. It's just hard to maintain that concentration. So otherwise I would have had it done by today, but it's a little bit tricky than normal. Okay. You've written a lot of books. What has been your favorite book to write?
2 come to mind. Calico Joe, because it's about baseball. And I was able to go back and do some just wonderful research into real players and statistics and teams and World Series and things like that. So I really enjoyed the story. The fictional story as it developed. That was a lot of fun to write. A Painted House was a real joy because I did it because my parents had told me these stories for my whole life. My father was a storyteller, my grandfather, and I'd heard all these old family tales, probably all fiction, but handed down, as true stories. And I wanted to collect those in a book and write about my childhood on the cotton farm in Arkansas, which is all true, and be able to get my parents to help me. They were great resources for how life was back then in the 40s and 50s. It was very harsh, but they were a great source for me to call and ask about certain things. So we had a lot of fun with A Painted House, and I wanted to finish that book and publish it while they were still alive. And they really enjoyed its success. So those 2 books come to mind.
Those are great answers. That's terrific. We're all big fans of your Theodore Boone books for young readers as well around here. How do you approach those books differently, either writing or conceptually?
Well, it's some big differences. First of all, it's a series.
Sure.
And I've written 7 now. And after about 3 or 4, I realized I could not remember everything I'd put in the first 3 or 4. I mean, I can't remember all this stuff. The first Theo book was published 10 years ago. And I can't remember all the names and names of stores and shops and ice cream parlors and streets and dogs and police, all the people Theo knows. And then I said, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. Then I started getting letters from 10-year-old kids across the country who found mistakes. They would find a mistake in, Theo 5, I'd said something different in Theo 2. And I said, I've got to stop this. I'm so lazy when it comes to research. And I never like to go back and read my stuff. Once I'm done with a book, I'm done. I'm moving on to the next book. I do not enjoy reading what I have already published. And so for me to have to go back and reread earlier stuff is kind of painful for me, because I mean, I'll read a sentence and I'll cringe and I'll say, that's not very good. Sometimes I'll read a sentence and say, that's not bad, but you're always judging yourself when you go back and read your stuff. So I stay away from it. But I've had to do that with Theo, and that's been a huge change. The books are obviously fewer words, and they're for kids, so the plots are not as complicated. The characters are not as complicated. The vocabulary is a little bit lighter. So there are some changes, but it's still a lot of fun to write about Theo. He's always going to be 13 years old. He's never going to grow up and go to law school. He's never going to become a lawyer. He's going to be stuck in a small town, and for I hope a long time, getting into a lot of trouble because he gives his friends a lot of free legal advice. He thinks he's a lawyer.
They're a lot of fun. So we opened up Facebook and Instagram to some fan questions, and I think John may have some more he's going to bring over to me. Maybe we can do these a little more quickly so that we can get through more of them. But Charles Sanchez Jr. asked a question we all want to hear the answer to, and one that I know you've been asked many times. Who do you like to read?
I have favorites. There are a handful of writers that I buy their books as soon as they come out. So that kind of judges who my favorite writers are.
Sure. Yeah.
I tend to read the other lawyers, Scott Turow. When Scott publishes, I'm going to read his book right then. Some crime writers. James Lee Burke has always been a favorite.
Sure.
Michael Connelly, Harlan Coben, some of those guys, I enjoy their work. James McBride is a favorite. Let me see. I should have had this. John Le Carre is a longtime favorite. The British guy. That's enough for now. I mean, I'm always behind. I'm always behind reading. I never can catch up.
Well, you'll have a new Scott Turow and a new James Lee Burke next month, so that'll be exciting for you.
Scott's coming out next month.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Sherry Boyd asked, who is your favorite character in your own books? And then do you have a favorite series character in any books of your contemporaries?
My favorite character is Jake Brigance, because when I wrote A Time to Kill, I was living that life. I was a small town lawyer in Mississippi, struggling to make a living, not make a living, but struggling to build an office and dreaming of being a big time trial lawyer. And I had a pretty wife at home, was having babies, and life was good, but I was still working very, very hard to try to get ahead. It's very tough in a small town because there's so many lawyers. So I was living that life of Jake, dreaming of this big trial where everybody would be watching me in a big courtroom setting. That was me 35 years ago. And so Jake has always been my favorite character because he's so autobiographical. Favorite character in a series is probably Robichaud and James Lee Burke's. He's my favorite.
Great. Jacob Zeke noticed that in your books, there are often Christian themes, and he finds that admirable in today's society. Is this intentional and a focus for you, or just when it fits the story best?
I don't try to work in too much in the way of Christian themes. I write a lot of my stories in the South, where faith is a lot more important than maybe other parts of the country. And so it comes natural when you're writing about characters, some of the things they do, some of the conflicts they have. You have to be careful with religion and politics when you write popular fiction, because you never assume that your readers share your politics or your religion. So you really can't, you have to be very careful with it and not preach. And my wife constantly says, get off the soapbox and go write an old-fashioned legal thriller and just entertain. And she's right about that. And so that's one reason the Camino books have been such a relief for me, is just, they're just pure entertainment.
They're just really fun. Yeah, absolutely. So Dean James will ask, what is the most interesting book in your rare book collection?
I have a first edition of The Sound and the Fury. I actually have two of them. One is in pristine condition, and in rare books, condition is everything. You can have a first edition of an old book by William Faulkner. If it's in bad condition, it's worth nothing. Right. They got to be in good shape. And I have an excellent copy of The Sound and the Fury signed by William Faulkner. And that's very, very rare. I have another Sound and the Fury that's in average condition, so it's not that valuable. But Sound and the Fury is by, so far the most impressive thing I have.
Right. David Shadwar says, Grisham has the best character names. How does he work out the names for each novel?
It's a nightmare. Every book has 200 names, and I've written 40 books. The math is easy. And with a name, you've got to have, if it's a major character, you got to have something that's not, common, like Joe Williams or Ben Johnson. Those are, there are thousands of those people. Nothing wrong with those names, but they're kind of common.
Yeah.
You can't get too exotic or ethnic because people have to be able to pronounce them. So you have to pick a name that the reader is going to be able to pronounce and remember. And, the people who are named Jones and Smith and Green, it's hard to remember those names throughout, a novel. So I'm constantly struggling to find names that are not too rare, too exotic, too odd. It's a common. I'm always looking for names. I love the obituaries because people are dead and they can't sue you. I wrote a book one time, and every character, I have this big baseball almanac with everybody ever played the game, and every character in the book was a second baseman before 1920. So that's how I get names. I'm always digging for names. It's tough.
So if we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. I got as many in as I could. You have something pretty cool happening tomorrow night alongside a fairly well-known person. You want to tell us a little bit about that and the cause?
Stephen King and I are going to go live on YouTube at 7:00, and just the two of us. And there's no script, there's no forethought, there's no agenda. We're old buddies, and we get together not often enough, but we get together occasionally and do something for a charity or do a program and a fundraiser. And we're doing it tomorrow night on YouTube. The cause is a really worthwhile cause. Bink is the nonprofit that supports booksellers and bookstore employees. A lot of bookstore employees are part-timers without a lot of benefits. And so we're, especially now in these times, Bink is a wonderful organization, been around probably 10, 15 years. They raise money to support you guys and your employees.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing that event tomorrow night. I know that they're a great foundation, and we've supported them through the years, and they're always the first people to reach out to us, whether it's a natural disaster or this pandemic happening. They reach out to us and ask what we need, which I always find incredible. They're so proactive with trying to support stores and booksellers. So thank you for doing that tomorrow night. To close this, I always like to do questions from the Proust Questionnaire with my authors that I'm interviewing, just so that we get an idea a little bit more about them and not necessarily them as an author. So for those not familiar, the Proust Questionnaire was something made famous or invented by Marcel Proust in 1885 as a parlor game, and it's more often associated with Vanity Fair right now because they do these questions. I have picked 6 short questions for you today. Which words or phrases do you overuse?
2 words come to mind. The word just, he just left, she just, and the word then. Right, I try to avoid using the word then. He walked into the door, then he turned around, then so I'm always fighting with those 2 words.
All right. Which talent would you most like to have?
To sing.
All right. Who is your hero of fiction?
Atticus Finch.
I knew that was going to be it. We had around here. Is it going to be Atticus?
A lawyer from Mississippi. What do you expect?
And then we've already covered who are your favorite writers, so we're going to move on from that. What is your most treasured possession? And by that, I don't mean family or pets, something inanimate.
One of my rare books.
Okay. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Life without a pandemic. No viruses.
Fair enough.
You know, I love to sit on the porch on a summer afternoon with a glass of tea and or a glass of wine or something, and just be able to read for an hour. That's and then not worry about the fact that I'm not producing anything or not doing anything. I'm just reading.
Just relaxation and reading.
Yeah.
That sounds. I think that a lot of people could relate to that. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank Todd Doty, your wonderful publicist at Doubleday, for helping set this up. Thank you, obviously, for joining us. Camino Wins is the new book out today. We have signed copies. I highly recommend this one as well as Camino Island. And if you place an order on our website, we'll assume it's for a signed copy. You don't need to worry about that. You can call us at 713-524-8597 to order. You can email us at order@murderbooks.com or visit our website, www.murderbooks.com. Thank you so much, Mr. Grisham. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. I'll come see you guys in Houston one of these days.
I'm going to hold you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You too.